cast all my cares upon you, and I lay all of my burdens down at your feet. And any time that I don't know what to do, I will cast all my cares upon you. I will cast all my cares upon you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Oasis at Conway Gardens Sunday morning online church service. My name is Stephanie Alman, and I am a part of the young adult ministry here at Oasis, and I want to thank you for joining us. If you're new, we're thrilled to have you, and for our regular attenders, it's great to see you guys again, and we cannot wait to see you again in person. Now, one thing our regular attenders know we do really well on a typical Sunday morning is our time of welcome, where we get to hug each other, shake hands, and catch up on each other's lives. Obviously, that's not happening now due to social distancing. We're all home right now, sitting on our couches, sipping coffee, and we're doing our online service. But we would still love to hear from you guys, whether you're new or not, whether you are watching this live or not. Post in the comments below, say hey, tell us how you're doing. We'd love to catch up and have a little bit of social interaction with you guys. Lastly, I do have a few announcements for you guys before we continue on with our service. First of all, our food pantry. We typically run that on Saturdays at the church, and people come in and grab some food that they need. However, for safety reasons, we're not doing that weekly right now. But if you're in urgent need of food, if you direly need something, please contact us. We are still here to help, and we want to help you guys, but we also want to adhere to social distancing guidelines. So if you need help, we've got contact information here on our Facebook page, or you can go to our website, which is oasisconwaygardens.org. For our regular attenders who do tithe, we've got two digital options for you now. One, you can send a text with the word give and then the amount, for example, give 100, or you can go on our website, and there's a link there that you can give online as well. The information for the texting number and the online site is on our website as well. That's oasisconwaygardens.org. If it's easier for you to mail a check, you can do that as well, and you can find our address on the website there. In addition to our regular sermon videos on Sunday mornings, we also have a prayer service afterwards. So as soon as this video ends, you can click out of it. We will start a new live video for a quick time of prayer. If you have any requests, please post them in the comments of this video below, or you can post them in the comments of that video as well. And if you have just a few extra minutes after this, we would love for you to join us for that as well. Last but not least, I do just want to remind you guys and encourage you to stay connected with us through social media. You can stay up to date on announcements, online services, and anything surrounding our church and our ministries. Our Facebook page and our YouTube channel are under the name Oasis at Conway Gardens, and our church website is oasisconwaygardens.org. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this online service.
Good morning, Oasis. We're getting ready to sing a song that when I was a little kid in the choir at a Baptist church in Virginia, about 9 or 10 years old, we used to sing a song called "This Is My Father's World." And it was about creation, about all the beautiful things in the world. And I just love the medley of it, the melody of it actually. And so let's sing it this morning. If you will sing it with me, I really need a lot of help on it. And it's called "This Is My Father's World." This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and randy rings the music of the Spirit. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the fall of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand a wondrous wrought. This is my Father's word. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's word. His glory fills the air. In the rustling grass I can hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's word. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, the heavens ring. God reigns, let the earth be glad. This is my Father's word. The battle is not won. But Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. As we prepare our hearts for worship this morning, please join me in singing a great song written by Chris Tomlin, How Great Is Our God. Then we're going into How Great Thou Art, written by Carl Buberg. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. And age to age he stands, and time is in his hands. Beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one. Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? All will see how great is our God. He's the name above all names. He is worthy.
Good morning. I'm Eric Loudermilk, interim pastor at Oasis at Conway Gardens in Orlando, Florida. Welcome to our Sunday morning service. Today we're going to do something a little different. Today we're going to be interviewing my good friend, Miguel Benitez from State College of Florida, and we're going to be talking about aesthetics and the divine. Miguel, good to have you. How are you?
I'm doing well, all things considered. Thank you, Eric, for having me on. I appreciate and looking forward to our discussion.
It's really good to have you with us. So why don't we start with introductions? Why don't you tell everybody a little something about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an instructor of humanities over at the State College of Florida, over on the west coast of Florida. Just started that at the beginning of this school year, so back in August. My wife, Daniela, and I, and our two children, Alex and Gabby, we moved over from the Orlando area to once I received this position. And so been teaching there, and as part of my own educational journey, I've kind of been interested in and always kind of majored in interdisciplinary studies of various kinds. But the two that kind of stuck with me have always been theology and philosophy. And as I've continued my educational journey, this issue of beauty came to the surface, and it was kind of brought about in some of my classes, but it was always very quickly touched on, and then we moved on from it. And so I increasingly was interested in this issue of beauty, and so much of the work that I do now is looking at both in the realm of theology and in the realm of philosophy, what beauty and art and these various different things, what they are, what their intended purpose is, and what we can know about them. So I'm currently working on my dissertation in my doctoral program, in which I'm looking at G.K. Chesterton's philosophy of art. And so basically my area of focus is aesthetics generally, which I would define as the philosophy of art and beauty. So.
Well, good. And so for our viewers, our listeners, I don't think we have a radio show here. It's easy to drop into that. Welcome to the show today. No, I actually went through some of those questions myself when I was doing some of my work. You know, everyone forces us to read philosophy. Unlike you, I wasn't fascinated with it. But I began to look and think more about beauty. And I came across this passage in Scripture that stuck really with me a lot. Genesis 2:9. The Lord God made all kinds of trees to grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden, were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge and good and evil. So tell us again, just so those of us or those who aren't familiar with the word, what is aesthetics again?
Yeah, so aesthetics, I think, can be, and there's different definitions, but I think generally we can define it as the philosophy of art and beauty, or to make it less, philosophical, we can even say just kind of contemplating art and beauty, right? We're asking questions about what it is and why it matters and why it affects us the way that it does.
Yeah, speaking of beauty, I've noticed a lot of people outside lately, and they seem to be enjoying that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just with the situation that's going on, I think a lot of people have sought to be outside. Others of us who maybe aren't able to get outside as much as we'd like in light of the situation, are missing the outside. But yeah, I think that the quarantining, the social distancing has provided us an opportunity to reconnect with the creation, reconnect with nature, in a way that we're oftentimes too busy to or too distracted to do. And so I do think we're kind of drawn to those things. And oftentimes the things that we do or the busyness of the day kind of can overwhelm us or distract us. And so for many, we've had this kind of forced pause. And so we're drawn to needing a change of scenery. And so it's provided an opportunity for us to maybe appreciate and contemplate some of nature's beauty that we oftentimes don't take the time to do when things are kind of normal.
Yeah, I have a neighbor just on the street. His name is Jim, and he's always making his yard look better. Makes me work on that commandment, thou shalt not covet. But this is something he's done recently, and he's able to do a little bit more, I think, because of how society stopped due to the virus and all. But it does cause me to wonder, Miguel, would you say that we have a human need, or do we sense a need to create beauty or order in our lives?
Yeah. So I think definitely there is this urge to be creative. In fact, I start my humanities courses by looking at ancient cave paintings, right? And as we look at ancient cave paintings, you look at the work, the materials, and these would have been a nomadic people. So they are creating these images, these works of art on cave walls, knowing that within a relatively short period of time, they'd be moving on to a new location. And yet it was still worth it to them, despite scarce resources, despite knowing that they weren't going to be staying very long. They still took the time to do that. And sure, there may have been some function to their drawings and things like that, which may have motivated them. But nevertheless, they took the time to do it. They took the time to use various different images and figures and colors. And so we see it in the earliest human civilizations, that no matter how dangerous life was, no matter how scarce resources are, humans produce art. Humans are always creating. And I think we can tie this back to, you referenced Genesis 2, I'll take us back to Genesis 1. We can tie it back to the very beginning. We're told at the end of Genesis 1 that God made male and female, both man and woman, in his image. And if somebody were approaching Genesis 1 for the very first time and didn't understand all of the background, all of the context, and was just reading it at face value and says, oh, okay, so man and woman are made in God's image. What is it that God has done which would be the image in which men and women are made? Well, what we know about God, other than God the Creator, from Genesis 1, is that God is rational. And so we oftentimes emphasize that second aspect, that God is rational. We are rational, and that makes us distinct as humans. But I also think very importantly tied to being an image bearer is this idea that we are creative. We as image bearers of God are a creative people. And that comes out in a number of different ways. So like with your neighbor's lawn, this desire to create and to make beauty. I think that's something that humans will oftentimes do, especially when we give it the appropriate time or the appropriate importance that it deserves.
Yeah, when I was wrestling through those things, and I was earlier in my teaching career, I was down in West Palm Beach, and our campus down there was less than a half a mile from the ocean, and we were right on the intercoastal. And so I would challenge students about beauty and whether or not they're drawing beauty. And I would say, so when you take a break and go to soak in some rays, you grab your lawn chairs and you run up to the landfill, because there was a landfill just north of us.
Sure.
Between 95 and, we've got some new noises today. I was doing an interview the other day that got broadcast on the University Channel, and my window was open and a dog started barking in the middle of the interview.
Okay.
But hey, I think this morning on the news show I was watching, one of the mics went out on the guys at home. So
we're all going through it right now. Absolutely.
So I would tell the students, so you take your lawn chairs and you go to the landfill. There's no trees. There's a lot of the stuff is grassed over. They're like,
right.
No, you go to the beach.
Right.
Why do you go to the beach? Because we're drawn to beauty.
Sure.
So I got to admit that I'm feeling more peace and less hecticness. I'm not sure if that's a word, in my life and my family's life. Part of that is I've had more time to catch up on grading, but we're
Sure.
outdoors more and so forth.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who are experiencing the same? Like my mind's even started drifting to auditory beauty, auditory aesthetics, because I'm noticing the birds more,
Right.
singing in my neighborhood. I mean, we're even seeing on the news now that a lot of wild animals are retaking downtowns in some cities
Right.
in the world because of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I saw somebody that I follow on social media post an image, a picture of their front door, and there was a moose in front of their front door, and they're like, don't think that I live like in the middle of nowhere. Like, we're in a suburban neighborhood. Like, this is not normal, and so certainly that, you mentioned hearing birds. I was sitting out on the porch. We don't get to go outside as much just because of where we're at, but we have done a lot more sitting on the porch. And as I was doing that the other day, I started hearing a bird, and I was like, I don't know if that's a new sound or if I'm just for the first time taking the time to actually experience it and listen to it. So I don't know how much of it is new. I think a lot of it is, but I also think a lot of it is us just having the time to appreciate it and to give it our attention. So I think that's some of it. And certainly how we're feeling during this pandemic is going to largely be rooted in our situation, right? You and I are fortunate enough that we're still employed. We're still being able to, pay our bills. And so we're able to focus on these things. And in some ways, like you said, it's opened up more time because certain things we're able to kind of consolidate them. And so our workflow might be a little bit faster just in light of the situation. So I know I've experienced some of that. But yeah, so I think for a lot of people, this has been a time in which they've found themselves with more time. I think for some, that's led to increased social media. I think that's led, we still find ways. And some of that's understandable. Yeah, and I think some of that's understandable. We long for connection. I don't think that social media can ever give us the connection that we're really longing for, but I think it's where we turn. And some of these tools have been helpful. I mean, the number of people I've spoken to on Zoom now in the last 3 weeks, is probably more than what, total before that period of time. And so we can appreciate these tools, but I think a lot of people have been able to take advantage of it, get outside, appreciate beauty. And so I think that is a contributing factor as to why maybe some are experiencing more peace. You're being able to set down some things. It's a forced kind of stop, right? Mm-hmm. You can't just ignore it. You have to slow down.
Could it be that experiencing creation, the outdoors, putting our phones away and getting outside, and maybe even having less to do, is forcing us to see things closer, although maybe only a step or two closer, to the way God created things to be?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there are certainly levels, right, to beauty. And when we look at the created world, when we look at nature, right, we're talking about something that has been kind of, in a very real sense, created by God, as opposed to some of the beautiful creations that we humans make. I think there is a difference there. And I also think that what can oftentimes happen when it comes to the issue of beauty is that we get oversaturated. So whatever things we may find beautiful, and that truly are beautiful, certain songs, certain images, we're so inundated with those things and oversaturated with those things because these phones we walk around with can give us that any moment of the day. Mm-hmm. Where now this forced stop, this kind of forced reset to get outside, notice things we don't typically notice. A major element of beauty is surprise. It's hard to be surprised by the images that we see day in, day out. But nature, when we haven't been as focused on it in some time, can bring a lot of surprise to our attention. So it grabs our attention.
You know, I didn't know you were going to give surprise as one of your answers. Obviously, we've talked through our questions and knew we were going to go, but that's a major element in story as well, which, yes, you know, it's one of the areas I like to study. But when we lived in West Palm, one of the things that so many people talk about is, you know, you're living in paradise, but you have to pinch yourself because you become so numb to it.
That's right.
And in the summers, I like to go hiking, usually in a mountainous area. And the freshness of that beauty always hits me and takes me to a new place. And of course, now that I've lived outside of West Palm and I don't go to the beach as often, when I go back to the beach, it hits me in a fresh way. Whereas in the day-to-day, we become numb to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is maybe even a lesson we can pull from this time that we're experiencing is because I do believe that beauty and the search for beauty, because of where it leads us, as with goodness, as with truth, is an essential part of the spiritual life. And so understanding now that maybe we've fallen into a certain kind of monotony, understanding that maybe we're not doing things that would allow ourselves to kind of remove ourselves from the situation of being oversaturated with the beauty we do have. When you can remove yourself from that, you're able to appreciate new beauty, and then also allows you to appreciate the beauty that you take for granted each day. I got to go to Arizona this summer for a seminar, and I was shocked because I knew Arizona was desert, but I didn't know that it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it really is in a very different way than like living in Florida. It's hot in both places, but other than that, they look very different. And so seeing the beauty in Arizona allowed me to kind of wake up to that, but then also even in returning, appreciating some of the colors, some of the nature that we have here in Florida that's different.
Yeah, it is good. So we've been dancing around a topic, and those who are a little versed in philosophy and art are going, wait a minute. There's no such thing as an objective standard of beauty. So we can't get around this. So let's talk about this for a moment. Is there such thing as an objective standard of beauty? And I have more flowers from my neighbor Jim's garden here.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's, a question that should be asked. I think it's a fair question. I think we live in a society that has adopted uncritically adopted the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And we think that somehow this must be true because there's disagreement, right? But just because there's disagreement among people doesn't mean that there's a right and wrong, that there isn't, that there isn't a right and wrong, or that there isn't a beautiful and a less beautiful. And so I think that that's a really important point to raise. So is there an objective standard of beauty? You've put beautiful flowers up on the screen. And if we were to all of a sudden just bring in a new image right next to it, and it was a rat carcass that's deteriorating and being eaten by maggots, I don't think it would take very much for us to be able to say, yeah, definitely the flowers are more beautiful. And so we struggle to want to say it because we think it's too close-minded, or who's to say whose opinion is better than another. And I think what we need to recognize is that there is a distinction between beauty, as this objective quality, and taste, right? So there may be things that I like. There may be a certain kind of music that I like more than the kind of music that you like. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't change the fact that some music is more beautiful. Some music is better than other kinds of music. And I think that that's the key. We all have our little snacks, and we've probably been going to those little snacks more during quarantine that we like. But none of us would mistake that little snack for a gourmet meal, right? And just because we like it doesn't mean that it's of higher quality or of greater beauty. So is there an objective standard? I think it's plain to see that there is, and we're only forced to say that there isn't because of other assumptions that we make. And so I think when we look at it critically, we know, yes, some things are more beautiful than others. And so we want to then ask ourselves, why is that, right? Why is it that some things are more beautiful than others? Why is it that a Shakespearean play is better than, or more beautiful than, if I just sit down and write one myself? Why is it that Rembrandt's paintings are more beautiful than, if you were to walk into a 6th grade art class and look at the paintings that are being made? Now, we may appreciate it, and especially if one of those 6th graders are your children, it has a certain kind of value to you, but we would acknowledge it's not as great of an artwork. And so I think that's the key. That becomes evident to us, and ultimately, this standard of beauty points us to the ultimate standard of beauty. The standard of beauty points us to the maker, the creator, the greatest fine artist, and that is God, the creator. And so one of the things that I think is important to note here is God is ultimately beautiful. And if God is spirit, then we also have to understand that physical beauty, and this is a point that Jonathan Edwards makes, physical beauty is actually a lower kind of beauty, because it's a kind of beauty that is pointing us to something that is greater, something that is transcendent, something that is beyond, which is spiritual beauty. And this is why, for example, I can sit here and say, my wife and I, we're about to celebrate our 10th year of marriage. And I can sit here and say, genuinely, truthfully, not just in an attempt to, get in good with my wife, but I can truly say that my wife, over those 10 years, and I suspect till death do us part, has continued to get more beautiful, despite the fact that our world tells us as you get older, you get uglier. And the reason why that's backwards is because it fails to understand that beauty is ultimately found in holiness. And so as my wife has increased in holiness, she more reflects ultimate holiness, that the one that is holy, which is God, the creator. And so in that, she grows more beautiful. And I mean that genuinely. And so the physical beauty is always pointing us to a greater reality that goes beyond the physical. And being aware of that then points us to, okay, what is the non-physical reality that it's pointing us to? It's the Creator that has made the physical beauty in the first place.
Well, I threw up the slide because you just segued right into our last question there.
Yeah.
And probably a good way to wrap this up is just to make the point that, there's a lot of people checking out these new online church services.
Sure.
Many of us have joked that suddenly we all became televangelists, and none of us wanted to be. But I suspect there's a lot of people out there who are listening to Miguel and I talk, and maybe you've had some of these wonderings in your heart in the last couple of weeks or months, and you're doing a little searching. And Miguel and I have both been through those searches, and we want to encourage you to continue thinking along those lines. We both obviously believe there is an objective standard of beauty, and that there is a beautiful one beyond all the beauty we see. So you're welcome to go back and look at some of our previous recordings here at the church, but we would love to invite you along the beautiful journey of following Jesus. Thanks for joining us today at Oasis at Conway Gardens in Orlando, Florida. Thank you for joining us, Miguel.
Thank you for having me.
The name of this song is Jesus Draw Me Close. And the closer we draw to God, the more we see His beauty. The beauty of creation, the beauty of Christ coming and giving His life for us. So many beautiful things that may not always seem beautiful, but when you look down deep, very beautiful. Jesus, draw me close, closer, Lord, to you, and let the world around me fade away. Jesus, draw me close, closer, Lord, to you, for I desire to worship and obey, for I desire to worship and